Hey, good day, everybody, and welcome to your Ruby Live event. My name is Eric Wynkoop, and I'm the Director of Culinary Instruction here at Ruby, and I'm also one of your chef instructors in some of the courses. And it's great to see you today, and welcome more specifically to my office hours. This is your chance to ask questions about food and cooking, and my opportunity to do my best to respond to them. And as you think about participating more directly today, you are welcome to do so by posting a question or even a comment. And you can do that by first looking at the small gray dialog box in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Go ahead and type in your question, and it'll make its way to the queue, which you see on the right-hand side of the page. You can see a number of questions already posted. And another thing I'd like to mention as we get started is that, as you look at the questions on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll notice a heart-shaped icon associated with each one. And if you'd like to see that question answered sooner than later, go ahead and click on that icon, and it'll push that question up in priority. Okay? And, the last thing I'd like to mention as we get started is, if you do have a question, please limit your questions to food and cooking, and avoid straying out into medicine and chemistry and other fun topics associated with food. Okay. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and start today's program. And what I'd like to do, first of all, is briefly address a topic that I have been answering lately from students that have reached out to me individually. And this concerns the use of alcohol in cooking, and more specifically, how to omit the alcohol and what to do in that situation. Okay, so let me first of all say that we have a number of recipes that do call for alcohol of different types, and certainly in the world of cooking you're going to see a lot of this. And the alcohol might be wine, it could be beer, or it could be a hard liquor of some sort. And the reason, very simply, for a recipe calling for an alcoholic beverage is for its flavor, just like most of the other ingredients in the recipe. Okay. And, as I'm sure you're aware, there's a long tradition of using alcohol as an ingredient, very simply. And for those that want to omit the alcohol, it really depends on the function of the alcohol in the recipe and how we might approach that. Okay. But generally speaking, alcohol is going to be a secondary flavoring in a preparation. So in the cuisine kitchen, so not the sweet, baking and pastry kitchen, but on the cuisine side of the operation here, it's most commonly wine, either red or white. Sometimes it's beer. And in those instances, the beverage does function to provide flavor. And it's, first of all, easiest to simply omit that item. It's typically one of several ingredients and provides a small component of flavor. Okay. Now, if you want to substitute something for that lost flavor, that omitted flavor, then consider stock. And so whatever type of cuisine you're doing, just think of the appropriate type of stock, whether it's vegetable stock or chicken stock or something that's got some extra aromatics to help it come into alignment with Chinese cooking, for example. Feel free to use stock. Now, you can also reach for fruit juice, and keep in mind that fruit juice is usually accompanied with some noticeable sweetness. So think about how that might be compatible with the recipe. Also keep in mind that the sugar, right, the sweetness in a fruit juice is often welcomed, right, as a seasoning and also an additional taste, component that just adds complexity to the finished product. Now, the fruit juice that I most frequently reach for if I don't have stock would be apple juice. It tends to be fairly neutral and is compatible with a lot of different preparations. All right. You can always dilute apple juice to tone down some of the sweetness or flavor intensity if you like. So play with those things, experiment with those things. You have a poetic license, so to speak, and have some fun with this aspect of cooking. Okay. Now, if you want to look at some other situations where the alcoholic beverage provides a more prominent flavor, then you need to start thinking about some sort of a non-alcoholic equivalent. And you want to take a look at those products and see if they will be acceptable to your particular situation. Okay. And if not, then we're talking about finding a completely different ingredient and changing the profile of that product, that finished product, where that alcohol was playing a big role, right, in flavor development. Okay, and we would need to address those on a case-by-case basis. And so you're welcome to reach out to us, to me specifically, if you want, via support@ruby.com in those instances, or feel free to experiment in the kitchen. All right. So that's what I want to talk about today in terms of alcohol substitutions. The next thing we'll do is take a look at the questions that are posted for today's office hours. And the first one, ranking in with 4 hearts, is from Graham. And this one says, a basic question, but there seems to be differing opinions and examples. When do you add oil to a pan? In what circumstances? Cold pan, hot pan? I have also seen some examples of cold pan plus oil plus onions if you are just going to sweat the onions. Okay. So the basic approach is this is general cooking when we're talking about let's say sautéing an item, and sautéing implies, right, as a dry heat cooking method, it implies a relatively higher temperature. And while browning or caramelization is not absolutely necessary when sautéing, it's usually a part of sautéing. Okay, so now with that in mind, when we talk about this idea of heating a pan and cooking something, okay, we talk about the sequence of heat the pan, add the oil and heat the oil, and then add your food product. Okay. Now, the issue is if you want to saute and you add ingredients that are cold into a cold pan, is that you will induce sweating, first of all. And in order to move out of the sweating phase into saute, you got to really crank up the heat, and it takes some extra time. And all of that's unnecessary. If we heat the pan, heat the oil, then add the product. Then you can move it around. You can lower the heat as you need to control browning, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, to your example, Graham, of cold pan plus oil plus onions, I agree with that. If you're out to sweat, and sweating by definition, right, is to impart no color to the food product, while we apply some gentle heat and start to soften the harsh flavor edges, maybe the harsh aroma. If it's onion in particular, or garlic, or other members, of that allium group, we start to develop sweetness, which is very often a desired outcome of this activity around onions. So a cold pan plus oil plus product is going to be a fine approach. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Thank you. All right, next up, The question says, I want to invest in a really good knife set and cookware, pot and pan set. What brand do you recommend? Aha. So here's my response. And this initial response you may not like in particular, but I'm going to say it anyway. And that is that I recommend that consumers, students, you, take a look online at consumer reviews. Also, take a look at product specifications so that you can compare apples to apples. Or if you want to compare apples to oranges, then at least you know what you're working with, okay, in terms of construction, material quality, the size, these sort of factors. Okay. But I think consumer feedback goes a long way this day and age because there are so many products on the market. And even a given product line can change. Every couple, 3, 4 years as a specification is tweaked. And with that in mind, I'm not up to date on every single item on the market, so I'm not able to give you really a fair review of products. Whereas there are websites that can do that for you. Consumer Reports is one of my favorites. Good Housekeeping is another site that provides what seems to be some fairly objective feedback on products. But with this in mind, this question in mind, this topic here, let me talk about this. Okay. When selecting a knife set or a single knife or a cookware set or even a single pan, in my opinion, it's best to get your hands on the product if possible. Now, I realize it's challenging to do that today, not just because of the pandemic, but because over the years, there has been a decline in stores that sell an array of products because more and more of this is available online. But for example, the weight of the pan might be important to you. And keep in mind, when you pick up a pan that it's going to be empty, right? And you need to consider the weight when it's full of food as well. And so this has to do with your strength or other conditions, right, that we live with. And so it's important that we get our hands on these products. When it comes to knives in particular, the fit to the hand, the design of the grip, the balance, we talk about the balance between the blade and the knife handle. These factors come into play with your comfort, especially on those days when you're doing a lot of cooking. And, we want the knife to be an extension of our body so that it's comfortable and in the long run, safe. Safe meaning that we're not going to experience undue stress on the hand, the wrist, the elbow, the shoulder, the neck, the back, the hips, the ankles. This carries all the way through the body over a period of time. Now, that might not be the biggest concern for a home cook who does limited cooking each day, but if one does do larger volumes of cooking, whether you're volunteering or you're doing this professionally, then you definitely want to think about this because this repetitive trauma, okay, repetitive use syndrome could lead to long-term injury, okay? But back to your topic in question here. So, in terms of brands, okay, I'm just going to throw out a couple of them for you to consider. There are many, many more on the market, okay? In terms of cookware sets, one that I've seen recently is the Kirkland brand stainless steel set at Costco. Okay, something to think about. I recently, used somebody's all-clad stainless steel set. It was fine. Let's see, in terms of cutlery, one of my favorite go-to brands in terms of the value that it delivers is the Victorinox brand. And this is a relatively inexpensive brand. Is nothing special about it. It's made of stamped steel. It's got molded rubber handles. But several years ago, it was one of these recommended products by the folks at Consumer Reports. And, I use Victorinox products as well as Schoon and Wüsthof and Henkel and a bunch of other brands, frankly. And, from a value standpoint, the Victorinox product is one that I would recommend. If something that is has a better image, if you know what I mean, is important, then maybe Victorinox is not the way to go. Then maybe you're looking for something like Schoon or Henkel or Wüsthof, depending on what style of knives that you want. Maybe those brands are more important. If you really want to get into it, then consider custom-made cutlery, or at least one knife that's custom-made to fit your style of cooking, the size and strength of your body. And that might be a fun addition to, an otherwise off-the-shelf knife set. Okay, and the same can be said of pots and pans, right? I will add that my cookware collection at home is eclectic. I'll say it consists of stainless steel, nonstick. I've got copper, tin lined copper, stainless steel lined copper, cast iron, enameled cast iron. I've got earthenware pots that are glazed, earthenware pots that are unglazed. I've got stone, and I use them all. And they are associated with specific regional cuisines, as well as just what I'm feeling like at the time. And so that's a different way of approaching cookware and accumulating a cookware set. So again, if one's personality might require that you have a matching set, then that pushes you down a particular avenue. But if you want to start to collect interesting and functional pieces over time, then you can pick up things secondhand. You can buy things that are on sale, and have a good time doing that as well. Okay, so give it a try. Consider hopefully what I said, and you'll find what fits you the best. Thank you. All right, next question. Hello, Carla. Are there any tricks you use or know of to have the vegetables not stick to the side of the blade on a chef knife while slicing them? Sticking makes it harder to cut faster as they accumulate on the side of the blade. No, I don't know any tricks. I'd be happy to share any secrets, but I just don't have any. I kind of like that look of the snowplow, right? When you're just chomping through something and those carrot pieces are flying off your knife. But that is the reality in the kitchen. And every once in a while, we get to stop and clear off the blade. Or if it's okay that some of the pieces get cut 2 or 3 times, then you can just move on through your stack of food items. Okay, but I'm sorry, I don't have any other tricks to share. All right, thanks. All right, next question. On the dashboard are the lessons. So are the lessons an additional cost? Are they part of this course? So lessons are accessed as part of a monthly membership payment arrangement, okay, which is separate from a course enrollment. All right, thank you. All right, next question is, what's the best way to measure and cut parchment paper to fit perfectly in a loaf pan? Okay, gotcha. I thought it was going to be something easy like a half sheet pan. So in a loaf pan, what I tend to do is I get a tape measure. In fact, I've got one in the kitchen right now, and just measure the inside, the sides the best you can. And if the loaf pan sits like this, I'll try to get a piece that covers the side, the bottom, and the side, and then maybe a couple more pieces to just sort of stick to the sides. Sticking to the sides onto the oil or butter or whatever you might be using to line the pan. Another old school sort of a frugal approach is that if you're using butter or these non-butter butters that come in that are parchment wrapped, then you just save those wrappers and you can use those to line your loaf pan as well. So that's another approach. Okay. But yeah, again, no secrets here. There's nothing high tech about it. Just a quick measure and then apply fat to the pan, and then the paper will adhere. Okay. Thank you. All right. Next up from Paula. I am 83 years old and may discover that I have some limitations that make completing the tasks more difficult than expected. Is there any objection to my doing my best to complete the course, even if it turns out that I am unable to do all its parts? Paula, I have no objections to you doing your best, and that's all I can ask, and that's the best we can do, and regardless of age. But I appreciate you reaching out on this topic. If you're bumping up against a particular aspect of the assignment, let's say, that seems to be an important part of the assignment. It could be an important part of the assignment, meaning that it could be a learning outcome. And you can either just move on forward in a way and at a pace that's comfortable for you, and we'll provide feedback accordingly. Or if you want to investigate that further, feel free to reach out to us at support@ruby.com. And I would be happy to discuss it with you, or any of my teammates here would be happy to discuss the particular issue and how you might problem solve. So feel free to keep that approach in mind as well. Thank you so much. Okay, next up from Kristen. Let's see. I have, and I can't even pronounce this, some sort of a deficiency, so I cannot tolerate mushrooms. I find mushrooms are a common meaty substitute in plant-based cooking. What options do I have to substitute them? Okay. Yes, mushrooms do appear frequently, both for their texture and for the umami that they provide. And it's really just a matter of experimenting, and finding a workaround. And so, you mentioned meaty, which implies texture. In this case, you might consider something like seitan, which can be formed into small, meatball-shaped pieces, and in any size that you want, to add a nice texture to an item, to a larger dish, a stew or soup, for example, where you might find mushrooms. And otherwise, if we're talking about the taste, that aspect of umami that tends to come from many mushrooms that we use, then we're talking about just bringing in additional ingredients, whether they're spices or it could be herbs. It could be introducing more browning, deeper browning, which introduces a lot of that flavor and taste, that depth that we look for in a dish. And so, those are a couple of ways that I would approach this a mushroom substitution. Okay. And, if you have a more specific example that you want to sort of poke at together, then reach out at support@ruby.com and we can do some brainstorming. All right. Thank you. All right. Next up. Hello, Cherie. I have heard of umami. Look at this. Okay, how timely. But I'm unsure of its full meaning. Okay, so umami is this concept, this particular sort of taste sensation that was coined or labeled or discovered in Japan about 100 or so years ago. And I mean, all of that led to the development of the synthesized monosodium glutamate under the brand name of Ajinomoto, and that's a different story. But in terms of how we think about umami today, it's been adopted probably more in the U.S., for example, more in the mainstream over let's say 20 years ago or so is really when I started seeing it. And it's adopted as a taste along with the sweet and the sour and bitter and other aspects of foods. Now, the idea of umami is to bring in this delicious, tasty, satisfying aspect to the food. And on one hand, in this English language context here in the U.S., we talk about umami as being based on glutamates, which it is. And so hence there's a lot of discussion of adding foods that are naturally rich in glutamates, such as mushrooms and tomatoes and animal meats and stocks. Okay. Now, umami is more than that. It's about layering these flavors to add depth and complexity and thereby satisfaction to the finished product. And so, we do that by layering different tastes and flavors. There's sweetness and there's salt. There's salt can be derived from different sources, right? There's the clean flavors of, say, kosher salt. But other salts contain minerals and a lot of flavors, and so they can be interesting to work with. But also, salt can be in the form of soy sauce, and soy sauce itself is a source of umami with all of its other flavor that comes along with it. And we talked about alcohol earlier. So alcohol comes to mind again in this context, and sake is an example that comes to mind, specific to the Japanese kitchen right now. I'm just thinking about where this concept of umami came from. But that's another place that you can reach in order to add this layering of flavor that in the end adds, again, complexity and interest to the dish. I mentioned deeper browning of the food. This idea of caramelization or employing your chosen cooking method is important also in developing the overall flavor interest of a dish. Okay, so we're employing a lot of different things in order to create this deliciousness that is part and parcel of the concept of umami. Okay, and I hope that's helpful. Umami can be a difficult concept, at least initially, to wrap our arms around. It's not one that we can just put our finger on, like sweetness or like sourness. It's much more subtle. It's much more complex, but at the same time, I think very obvious as you start to play with this idea, okay, of creating complexity in food through taste and flavor development. All right, give it a try. Do some reading on it as well. There's plenty of information out there now, I think, to get one started on this concept of this idea of understanding umami. All right, thank you. All right, Graham is back. In the world, flavor and taste are used. Oh, okay. In the world, okay, flavor and taste are used interchangeably. I was interested in your take on flavor profile. Ruby Map video describes flavor profile as region, nation, so Italian, Asian, flavor, okay. Food writers on the internet focus on taste. Is there a common definition? Okay, so let me take a sip here of this turmeric water, and then I'll get right to business here, Graham. So, flavor profile. Um, let's see. Yeah, so let's talk about this flavor profile. Okay, I'm just formulating my thoughts here. When I think about flavor profile, what comes to mind is, first of all, uh, well, maybe not first of all, but that just these two concepts really that you've mentioned here. One, I'll say first of all, it's this broader regional, national profile of flavor. Like, how do we characterize, um, northern Italian food? How do we characterize Oaxacan food from Mexico? And I choose those sub-regions, right? Because in my opinion, to say Italian food is a little bit too broad, right? Where certain ingredients might be favored more in the southern part of Italy, and other sort of defining ingredients like dairy products might be more popular in northern Italy, at least historically. Okay, so if we talk about traditional flavor profiles. Maybe that should be qualified, okay? Because in today's era of, um, you know, globalized cooking and fusion cooking, without studying some of the geography and some of the history that goes into food, sometimes we can misinterpret what flavor profiles are on a regional or broad national sort of basis. Okay, but looking at it from that standpoint, I think about the ingredients that are characteristic, right, of that profile. And on one hand, you might choose Mediterranean ingredients, whether there's certain herbs, maybe it's garlic and onions and shallots. Maybe it's a heavy use of olive oil. Maybe it's butter and cream and Parmigiano cheese in other regions. Um, and then, what other, vegetables or meats might be part of that? It could be seafood. It could be a preference for beef or pork or lamb, right? Depending on what other intervening factors might be part of that region. Ethnicity, past immigration patterns will influence a relatively contemporary flavor profile, right, of a region. Now, part of that is definitely the taste. So we talk about taste and flavor. So maybe I should take a moment and sort of tease those apart, and talk about them the way that we do, okay, in a professional kitchen. And so, on one hand, taste are those bigger building blocks, right? The sweet and sour, the bitter. We what did we talk about a few minutes ago was umami. Okay, and I know I'm missing a couple of others out there, but depending on where in the world you are, there's also astringent, right? Which is this a sensation that you get when you, for example, bite into an unripe banana peel, right? That sort of a sucking feeling in your mouth. Or for you wine drinkers out there, if you sip on a tannic wine, right? The tannins are astringent, and it kind of provides this tightening effect on the mouth. And so that's a desirable effect and an important taste in some cuisines around the world. There's also pungency associated with hot ingredients like chilies or black pepper or ginger, for example. And so again, depending on where in the world you are, the list of tastes will differ. And so keep that in mind. It's a culturally mitigated, okay? And then this idea of flavor is heavily based on aroma. And some sources will say this idea of flavor is 75% or maybe 80% aroma. And so, for example, if we compare a lemon and a lime, uh, one of the common tastes is going to be sourness. There's going to be some bitterness as well, especially with a lime. But oftentimes, if we plug our nose and we taste a lemon and a lime, they might be difficult to tell apart. But it's when we release our fingers from our nose and start to bring in that air and the smell component that we have flavor. And we can immediately figure out what a lemon flavor is versus a lime flavor, right? And there's many such examples out there, but um, flavor is a big part of this as well. And so, while there might be many chilies in Mexico, and many of them are hot, right, in terms of that important taste component, there are many different flavors. Some are more fruity, some are more earthy, some are more, this and that. And so, all those things come together to form a flavor profile of a given cuisine. And again, how broadly you want to look at that is going to be up to you. But I do encourage people to take a narrower and narrower view of cuisine, regional cuisine, sub-regional cuisine, and then also to study these other aspects of cuisine, such as um, the forces of globalization. Again, there's immigration, there's war, there's natural catastrophes that have encouraged, either pushed or pulled populations of people to move. And as those people have moved, of course, the one thing they take with them is their food culture. And that becomes a new overlay or a new layer of influence on a given region. And over time, we get certain complexities that develop, or certain isolated aspects, right, of the flavor profile within a given region based upon a certain community, of people. Okay, it becomes very interesting, in my opinion. This is the study of food anthropology, which is a big part of my own background. And so, hopefully this helps, Graham, as you ask this pretty big question, in terms of just what is this whole thing about food, flavor profiles. There's a lot of different ways to approach it, and it just depends on how nitty and gritty you want to get. All right. Thank you. All right. Next up from Tracy. Can you eat seitan on the Forks Over Knives plan? I have not seen it on the food list, but it has been referenced in the plant-based cooking class. So the quick answer is yes, you can eat whatever you want. Now, let me qualify that, okay? Certainly forks over knives, and our general plant-based approach at Ruby as well is to emphasize whole foods first. That's our preference. But a 100% whole food diet is, practically speaking, really difficult to practice. Okay, if you think about it, it's really difficult to do. So we start to introduce other foods that are processed to some extent. That's sort of just the reality of the balance that we end up working with. Okay. And so within that, if a person wants to create certain food items that, mimic the texture and the look of maybe certain foods of their past, their meat eating past, then seitan, can be a good ingredient to use because of its chewiness, its elasticity, the way that you can form it into different shapes to make sausage or brisket or meatballs, for example. And so, thinking about just cooking in general, I would say, sure, seitan can certainly be a part of an FOK way of eating, right? Or again, more broadly, a whole food plant-based way of eating. Okay. And all of that is going to be up to you. All right. To just how frequently you might want to eat seitan and how much you might eat at a given time. Okay. So, find your balance. One thing that I always suggest for cooks, for regardless of where you are and the type of cooking you're doing, is to make it stress-free and to do what you enjoy, and be sensible about your choices so that you don't have any remorse afterward. Cooking is about joy, and it's about nourishment. And so I think certainly some balance, needs to be struck as well. So give it a try and see if it's going to work for you. This Seitan question, that is, and go forth. Thank you. All right, Pilar. Good day. You look like a wise Buddhist monk. Well, thank you very much. Am I vegan? At certain times of the day, I am. Certain times of the week, I am, but not on a 100% basis. I have been known to eat some plant or some animal products from time to time, but I do prefer to lean toward my plant-based brethren. If so, how do you personally transition from meat to solely plant-based? What is in Ayurvedic cooking? Okay. In your plant-based course, does one learn cooking for healing? Okay, so got some great questions embedded in here. In terms of transitioning from meat to, in my case, mostly plant-based, I just did it, as they say, one step at a time, and that's what I would recommend for anybody. Start to introduce more plants to the table, which tend to push out the animal-based products. And as you develop your skills and knowledge around ingredient handling, as well as experimenting with cuisines of the world, I think you'll discover preparations and skills and techniques that will bring all of the satisfaction, right, of the animal-based dish of the past. And it's just all about finding those items to provide satisfaction. Now, part of this is also mental. Okay. And I often say that when we're up against a challenge, that the challenge really is 90% mental and about 10% physical. Okay. And it's just a matter of deciding that we can do it and allowing ourselves to make the change. Excuse me just a second, Hila. And I think that when we move away from the idea of consuming meat, for example, which, if you grew up in that culture, um, it's difficult to change because it is part of your culture. And culture implies that it's correct and it's normal and that you ought to do it. And so it takes time to undo those deep roots. Okay. But just do it a little at a time. And, if it turns out that you get there 95% of the way, feel good about that, and if it needs to be 100%, ask yourself, why does it need to be 100%? And if you want to keep on pushing toward 100, then go for it. But if for some reason it's not where you are right now, meaning 95 is, but 100's not, don't feel bad. Feel good about having more vegetables on your plate. All right, that's one, I think, approach that's important. So what's Ayurvedic cooking? Ayurvedic cooking is cooking that is in alignment, cooking and eating, right? That is in alignment with your particular dosha. And your doshic makeup is your constitutional makeup according to the Ayurveda theory. Okay. And I will just briefly say that each of us, and not just each individual, but this world that we live in, okay, whether it's today's weather or the food on the plate, your pet, your child, yourself, we are imbued with three doshas, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And they have different attributes to them. There's hot, and there's cool, there's wet, and there's dry, for example. And we need to balance those aspects, those doshas and their characteristics according to our individual makeup. And each of us is made up individually. And there's more to that, right, in terms of determining what that is, okay? But the cooking then is to prepare foods that are in alignment with you and who you are. And that's going to be one big step to maintaining your balance. There are other things to do in our dinacharya, our daily routine, whether it's exercise or going for a walk or staying warm or cooling down in certain ways during certain times of the year. But food is definitely a big part of that, food and nutrition, okay? As it really does make up the foundation of what happens inside of us from an Ayurvedic standpoint, okay? And so in a nutshell, that's what in an Ayurvedic approach to cooking would be. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach, okay? But it is very much possible to tailor a meal for different people at the table, okay, which is what we do at home here, for example. All right, and looks like we've got, a couple of live events from our archives that you're welcome to look at, where I discuss a little bit the principles of Ayurveda, okay? And the last part of your question, Pilar, is your plant-based course, or in the plant-based course, does one learn cooking for healing? So that's an interesting question, right? The idea of transitioning to more plants in itself is healing, okay? And so the quick answer would be yes. Now, we do have some subsections in our Pro Plant course, the Professional Plant-Based Certification course, the 6-month course, where we do talk a little bit more about nutrition. And, we ask you to do some homework that will have you focus on particular conditions to get a better idea of what sorts of foods can harm and what sorts of foods can help in those instances, okay? It's not a deep dive, but it certainly is an introduction to this idea of healing, okay? There you go. Hopefully that answers your questions. Thank you. All right, next question. I'm seeking my first whetstones. Do you have recommendations that won't break my bank account? There's, let me see here. Online, you'll find a lot of choices, right? One brand that I'm familiar with is, I think it's called King, and they're made in Japan. It's pretty popular stones in professional kitchens, in my experience. And, I would, without hesitation, encourage you to look toward that particular brand of products. And then, consider, at least two stones or three. And, probably to start off with, one that's in the neighborhood of 800 grit. It might be 1,000, but somewhere right in there, give or take a little bit, as your coarse stone. And keep in mind that the coarse stone is used occasionally, okay, to repair a nick or a chip on a blade, maybe the tip of a blade, or when you, for whatever reason, just need to put a new edge on that knife. It could be a situation where maybe you have acquired a knife secondhand and you want to refurbish it. That's a good time to use the coarse stone. And then the second stone, is one that, might be in the 3,000 grit range, 2,500 grit or so. It could be 2,000 grit, somewhere right in there. And that's going to be one that you would use pretty commonly in order to put a finer edge, on the knife. And then, ideally, you would have a third stone, which is much finer, probably in the neighborhood of 6,000 or 8,000 grit. And Opinions differ. Okay, so some people will want something that's even finer than that, but that will polish the edge. When you're rubbing that blade on something that's at 6,000 or 8,000 grit, it doesn't feel like it's doing very much. But you will notice that the cutting edge become very shiny as you polish that edge. And that's actually very important because it increases the integrity of the cutting edge and it will last longer. Okay. Now, of course, you still need to do daily maintenance with a steel or a diamond edge or a ceramic, steel, I'll say in quotes, or a honing rod. But in terms of the whetstones, then you would just need to use those occasionally as needed. Okay, and just it all depends on how much you use your knife, what you cut with it, and also how you care for it in terms of how you store it. It could be, you know, just once or twice a year that you put it on the stones, or it could be more frequently. Okay, but hopefully that gets you started. Thank you. All right, next question from Renee. When a task is pending, how will students be notified when the task has been graded? You will receive an email that will tell you your feedback on that particular assignment. All right, thank you. And from Cherie, let's see. How important is it to use organic and non-GMO ingredients? You see, I'm going to take a sip of water here because this could be a long answer. This is kind of a Pandora's box here of sorts, Cherie. On one hand, it may not be important at all. And I'll contextualize that by saying that if one is choosing ingredients on a limited budget, okay, and we recognize that certified organic vegetables and fruits, for example, are relatively expensive, okay, when compared to their conventionally grown counterpart. I would say don't worry about the certified organic product. Go for eating more fruits and vegetables because the health benefit is going to outweigh the other question here of being organic or not. Okay. However, along with being certified organic is the use of different chemical inputs during production, and arguably less harmful chemicals when it comes to the pesticides and other things that could be on the food product when we purchase them and consume them, or in the food products. Okay, so with that in mind, we're arguably getting a cleaner food product. Now, I would also mention, very importantly, that for the farm workers that are producing organic foods, things that are sprayed less, these things that are not genetically modified, their health is going to benefit from that setting, that situation, as well as the members of their family. Okay. And so I think that's a very important topic that often kind of slips under the radar in this broader discussion of certified organic foods. Okay. Now, as we talk about genetically modified foods, GM foods, foods have been genetically modified. Let me first of all qualify my views here on genetic engineering by first of all saying that I am not against genetic engineering, generally speaking. Okay, but I do exercise caution when it comes to genetically engineered food because genetically engineered crops, so things like soybeans and corn, are classic examples here starting in the US, but really worldwide today. Those were designed to be compatible with herbicides and pesticides as part of a larger agro-business operation. So you notice that I use the word agro-business and not agriculture. Okay, these are large-scale operations that are producing crops with an emphasis on business efficiency. And so when a seed, in this case, is designed to be compatible with an herbicide, what that means is that food crop can grow. And one of the biggest issues in farming is weed control. All right, so a genetically engineered crop, right, one that's been designed to go hand in hand with a particular herbicide, okay, that field can be sprayed, okay, to kill all the weeds, but the food crop will not die. Okay, and so the potential for more residual chemicals on the food increases, and as I mentioned earlier, that the transmission of that to the human workers increases. All right, so that's one of the concerns. There are others, but that's one of the concerns. Okay, with genetically engineered food crops, and therefore, this idea of avoiding them is a good idea. All right, so that's just part of the broader discussion here, but I'll stop with that example. Okay, but otherwise, it's all up to you and what you believe, what you value, and other aspects of your situation, such as your budget. All right, thank you. All right, got another question from Christiana. Traditionally, we butter and flour a pan before pouring batter in. What do you think of the sprays such as Baker's Joy? They're easier to use, but are they an adequate replacement? Personally, right? This is just me talking as a cook, as a baker. I don't use the spray products. I just prefer something that I recognize, I guess, whether it's oil or butter or coconut oil or whatever it happens to be that I'm using to oil the pan. Otherwise, take a look at how some of these things are packaged and how they're dispensed, and see if that technology, those means of delivery, right? I don't know what else goes in there in terms of chemicals, but just dig a little bit deeper and see how all of that aligns with your values and your food philosophy. Okay, and then go from there. I personally don't find any convenience in them. I don't find it laborious at all to rub oil on my loaf pans, for example. So therefore, I don't value those products. But as an individual consumer, I think it's important to develop a food philosophy, and maybe that's a talk for a different time. But do give some thought to it and see what you come up with. Thank you. All right, Melanie is asking, is mild white miso and miso paste interchangeable? I love the miso questions because I guess because I grew up with miso. But so here's the dealio. There are many, many different types of miso. And now outside of Japan, we see a very small subset of the possible miso varieties in the world. And, here in the Northwest of the United States, if I go to a grocery store, I might find 3 varieties, 5 varieties, maybe if I go to a Japanese grocer. I'm not talking about brand differences, but just style differences. There's red and white and garbanzo bean and saikyo miso, and I don't know, maybe there's another one out there. But Uh, so, in other words, there is no regular miso paste. Okay, first of all, just for sort of general discussion here, but white miso tends to be lighter in flavor. It often has a sweet profile, but not always. Okay, compared to the darker, let's say, red variety of miso, which tends to be heavier in flavor, more salt. Something often enjoyed in the cooler months of the year. And so, are they interchangeable? The quick answer is yes, but understand that your resulting flavor and underlying taste, as in the saltiness or sweetness of the food, could be different. And if that's okay with you, then you bet they're interchangeable. But just know what those differences are. And I always recommend that you just go out and you buy a couple of packs of miso and compare them so that you know firsthand, just out of the package, what they taste like. But then also as you use them in different preparations and use them in everything, okay, from soups and stews to miso soup to cookies, zucchini bread, put them in everything. You're going to find benefit and you'll see how they act and react differently in these preparations. Thank you. All right. Lisa, hello. I'm really loving this course. I'm a bit of a novice and still struggling somewhat with my knife skills. It just feels so awkward to me holding the vegetable and using my finger as the guide. Any suggestions to help me get more comfortable? Yes. Practice, practice, practice. I have been reciting that to my students for decades now. And that's really what's going to get you there, right? If you just think about the path that any seasoned cook, right? Anybody that maybe makes a living, right, as a professional cook, the path that they have had to go down, and it's just one of repetition, and it's repetition in everything. But in this case, we're talking about knife skill development. Use the techniques that we suggest because they are safe. We need to tuck the knuckles, all right, so that as the blade is coming down, we're not going to catch a fingertip, okay? Every once in a while, if I'm careless, I do that still, but it's few and far between, thankfully. But yeah, you start out slow, develop good habits, and then start to add speed as you become more comfortable, okay, with your knife as the extension of your hand, and the different sizes and shapes and the slipperiness, right, of these different food items that we are working with, okay. And then also have a box of Band-Aids nearby. Maybe not a full-on first aid kit, right? But just have some Band-Aids nearby because it happens, right? And just understand that that's part and parcel of the cooking experience. There's fire and there's sharp things, and every once in a while, we do need to attend to those boo-boos. All right, but it really is practice. But just adhering to the best practices that we are introducing to you at this point. Thank you. All right. Next question. What are your thoughts on non-stick rock stone cookware? Well, let me see here. Not the non-stick type. I'm not sure that I have experience with them, frankly. So I don't know that I can answer this question with any authenticity. Yeah, I would for thoughts. As I always recommend, I would say take a look online for some consumer feedback to see how uh, you know those comments might reflect your own situation and your own values, and try to sort of sort through that feedback. All right, thank you. All right, and looks like a related question here. Is there any preferable material for cookware, pots and pans? Is it possible to follow also a healthy cooking oil-free without Teflon? Or is Teflon nonstick also okay to be used extensively in the kitchen? Okay, so is there any preferable material for cookware? I'm okay with any cookware. I think it's just a matter of getting used to what it is that you have. And as I mentioned earlier in today's program, I use all kinds of cookware, nonstick to stainless steel and cast iron and copper and stone and earthenware, all this stuff. And it all works for me. So it's really just a matter of what you get used to using. Okay. And, in terms of, is it possible to follow a healthy, cooking that's oil-free without Teflon? Yes, but there's some limitations. I mean, there are certain things like hash brown potatoes that stick to the pan. I mean, I guess there's an exception, right? If it's a well-seasoned cast iron pan, then yeah, you can work around that, but you got to practice. But yeah, I mean, there are some things where, oil or nonstick, you got to take your pick. Otherwise, life is not going to be fun in the middle ground here. Okay, and so that's a battle that you get to choose. But otherwise, for much of cooking, you bet you can minimize or eliminate the oil and use our no oil saute sort of approach, which means we're introducing liquid to control pan heat and also to loosen up things that stick to the pan. And it's that takes practice as well. Okay, but you're going to see that in our Forks Over Knives course, as well as our professional plant-based course. Okay, and then you're asking, is it okay to use these nonstick surfaces extensively in the kitchen? And I think that's going to require some personal research, right? Certainly, if you ask the manufacturers of these cookware products, or if you ask the government, right, who ultimately in one form or another approves of these products as retail products, then the answer is going to be yes, they are safe. But there's also different approaches that people take in terms of the degree of caution that they exercise. And that is an area that you will need to investigate on your own. All right. Thank you. All right. And then looks like the final question here related to cookware from Alberta. Any opinions on green pan prestige ceramic nonstick cookware? I see you may have answered a similar question earlier before I signed on. As far as the green pan goes specifically, I know that at Ruby here, we have, that's one example of pans that we've used in the past. I recall that I've used them a couple of times, although I don't currently own a green pan. And I don't have any negative memories of them. I think, like a lot of these different types of cookware, you got to get used to using it. But I will add another thought, and that is, my own approach to nonstick cookware is that it's a disposable product, meaning that sooner or later, nonstick surfaces, at least all of them that I have encountered, will accumulate scratches. Sometimes they're micro scratches, sometimes they're more obvious scratches. But over time, as those accumulate, your nonstick pan will become a sticky pan, and it will need to be replaced. And so that's what I mean when I say that nonstick pans are disposable products, in my opinion. Therefore, I don't suggest buying a full set of nonstick pans. I recommend buying one pan, maybe two, if you need different sizes of nonstick pans. and then just replacing those singular pans as needed. And that's what I do here at home. The pan might last 2 or 3 or 4 years or so, and then I'm tossing it out. But otherwise, I've got all these other pans, stainless steel, for example, which will last a lifetime, literally. Okay, thank you. All right, next up from Sabrina. How do I incorporate grains, lentils, and such as separated dishes at a meal? How do I make a meal complete? Well, now, let me see if I understand your question, Sabrina. Perhaps you're asking about side dishes or standalone dishes that focus on grains or legumes. And so let me mention a couple of approaches here. Okay, one is take a look at some of our recipes, okay, for as a place to start or for inspiration. You can always, tweak them, making changes here and there to suit your situation, okay? But you can start with recipes and prepare a grain dish, prepare a lentil dish, and put that out along with other things that you might be enjoying for that particular meal, okay? And, introduce those categories of foods through that avenue, all right? Now, when I say look at recipes, right, I don't want to put the cart before the horse. Okay, the first thing you need to understand is the cooking methods, right, which is what we're all about here at Ruby. Understanding how to handle these different ingredients from the standpoint of cooking methods and the ancillary techniques that go into cooking. All right, that way you're not relying upon a recipe to get food on the table. A recipe might be something that you look at just for a little idea inspiration. And then you can go back to your own business of cooking, right? Because you understand the cooking methods and techniques. Okay. Otherwise, you can start to incorporate grains and lentils and other legumes by simply cooking them on their own and introducing them to preparations. Just throw in a fistful here and there. And it doesn't have to be a single variety. You can mix and match, introduce some nice complexity and interest, right, to a dish. Visual interest will vary, texture will vary, and flavor will vary, okay, by doing that. And this is an example of batch cooking, right, which is one of these foundational sort of philosophies or approaches that we introduce in our courses, whereby you are making a single item in a big batch, and you're using it in multiple preparations throughout the next couple of days or next few days. And it's a way of adding some efficiency to your overall cooking, especially when it comes to ingredients that take a long time to cook, such as grains and legumes, right? You're going to make a single batch on a Sunday afternoon when you have some downtime, and then you'll use that over the next 3 or 4 days in a number of different preparations, okay? These are a couple of different ways to start to think about incorporating these wholesome ingredients, just beautiful ingredients, into your meals. All right. Thank you. All right, Graham. Let's see. Pro Plant, task 173. One of the learning objectives is properly segment and use citrus fruit. Okay, but does not appear in the lesson. Where can I find this? Okay. You can find this in task 175. In fact, this was just supplemented. So you'll find this in 175. All right, thank you. Let's see, next up from Renee. What are ideal materials for half sheet pans? Carbon steel, stainless steel, non-stick surfaces, aluminum, or others? Are there any rusting concerns? Okay, so let me address your last question first around rusting, which probably would apply to any of these carbon steel sheet pans. And, in my experience, carbon steel sheet pans have some sort of a coating on them. So at least at the time of purchase, they don't provide any rusting concerns. But, if, any of these coatings get a scratch in them, then you might expect some rusting over time. I think that's reasonable to expect. But otherwise, in terms of ideal material, I think there are some different opinions out there. But I'll share mine, and I'll say that I tend to use plain aluminum sheet pans in a relatively heavy gauge, and a heavy gauge is going to be probably 13 gauge. That's going to be pretty heavy, and they're going to cost a little bit more at the time of purchase, but those will last a lifetime. Okay, as long as you're not using them for some light industrial use. That's non-culinary, that is. But there are other options out there as well in terms of lighter sheet pans. But I use aluminum, a lot of half sheet pans that measure about 13 by 18 inches. That's going to be a standard measure, outside edge to outside edge for a half sheet pan. Okay. And as you get into other disciplines, I'm coming primarily from a cuisine kitchen. I do some baking too, but that's going to be secondary on my list. But if Renee, in your case, you're enrolled in one of our baking and pastry courses, different bakers, different pastry chefs have their opinion on the type of material that they prefer for one reason or another. Okay, so I'll give you a little a hint here. Next Wednesday at 12 o'clock noon Pacific time is a live event with Chef Jackie of the French Pastry School. And, you might pose this question to him and see what he says. He's a wealth of knowledge and experience, and I would value his opinion as well in the baking kitchen. Thank you. And you'll see the posting right there for next week's live event. Thanks. All right. And look who's back, Graham. Can you explain the purpose of burnt butter in the squash risotto assignment? Decorative or taste? What color should it be? How should it be placed on the dish? Burnt butter is, you're going to get deeper flavor. And, this idea of burnt noisette is working on the milk solids that are present in the butter. And we're caramelizing them to develop deeper, more fully rounded flavor notes. And so it's going to be primarily for flavor. But certainly for appearance, right? If you're going to be placing it, as a finishing component at the time of service, then the customer is going to see, right, that item. It acts as a garnish of sorts. It adds value to the dish. And that can be very important, especially in a public setting, right, where you're selling food to somebody. You want to convey value. And if you were to mix in the burnt noisette so that it tasted good, but I couldn't see it as a consumer, I might not know where that good taste comes from. But if you just lay it out on top for me to see, then I can connect the dots between the visual component and that deeper flavor that I experience. Okay. And so that's how to handle that. Thank you. All right, another question from Pilar. Do you have any tips on how to cut off the silver skin from chuck roast without wasting meat or slicing off your fingers? Okay, yes. So the general technique on silver skin is you want to get your blade tilted up just a little bit as you pull it across the silver skin. Okay, and if it's turned up too much, it'll cut through the silver skin. But if it's at the right angle, it's going to slide right across the bottom of the silver skin. So that's going to be the technique part of that. When you've got a little bit of silver skin at the surface, it helps to use a towel to grab onto it. A cloth towel works great. And then you can slip your knife under there and then do your work. Okay? Give that a try. All right. Thank you. All right. And the next one, is there a trick to cooking eggplant so that it is not too mushy and the skin is not too tough? Aha. Um, yeah, I think it's all in how you choose your eggplant. My preference is to choose what are broadly called Asian eggplant. And you will tend to find thinner skins. And these are sometimes labeled as Chinese eggplant. And these are the longer varieties. Sometimes the Japanese eggplants are very small. Chinese eggplants tend to be larger in diameter, but they're thin and they're long. And I like to use those because of the thinner skin. And that way you can just control the cooking time to get the interior meat consistency where you want it. Okay. That's going to allow you more control and less control lying with the skin. Thank you. All right, next question from Dustin again. I made the maple walnut Dijon vinaigrette the other day for practice recipe in the pro course. I've stored it in a mason jar. How long should I expect to keep it in my refrigerator? Generally speaking, a vinaigrette or a dressing, let's start with a basic vinaigrette, right, which doesn't have much in it. Those will last a long time, right? You've got oil, you got vinegar, and then some really basic seasonings like salt and pepper. Now, as you start to add things, you want to think about the perishability of those additional ingredients. So something like herbs, right, will start to break down after a couple of days. You have darker colors. It's certainly edible, but it'll start to look and feel a little bit different. Something that's got some heartier ingredients, maybe nuts, for example, can hang around for a few days longer. I would probably try to eat it up within 5 or 6 or 7 days or so, just to enjoy the freshness of that dressing, even less than that if possible. Okay. But give it a try and see how you notice the aroma and flavor and the overall taste profile, the flavor profile changing as it ages. It's probably going to be edible for a while, but just that freshness aspect is going to shift. All right. Thank you. All right. Let's see. Next question. What grocery items are needed for class? Lots of stuff. You're going to need all kinds of things. It just depends on the unit, depends on what you choose to prepare. Okay. And so as you move through the course, you're going to have a chance to choose recipes when it comes to the assignments and when it comes to the practice assignments. And of course, each recipe is a little bit different. And so your shopping list is going to be unique to you. Okay. Not to mention the quantity of the food will also, be unique to your own setting. Okay. So what do you need to buy? All kinds of stuff. Take a look ahead and choose what you want to prepare, and then make your shopping list. Thank you. All right, question from Erica. Can you recommend a high quality knife set to get, preferably under $300? And so the cutlery selection is something that I touched upon earlier in today's program. And, I'll just very briefly say again that you might consider Victorinox if you want a good value that will last probably a lifetime. There's nothing glamorous about them, but they are workhorses. Okay. That's one place to start. Thank you. All right. And then Maribeth asks, any good vegan recipes? Yes, I think there are many, many good vegan recipes. And, here on the Ruby sites, in our recipe gallery, we have a subsection of plant-based or vegan preparations. And I think that's a great place to start. You'll find a wide variety of foods and baked goods as well. And then, beyond Ruby, once you practice with developing your cooking, understanding of cooking methods and cooking techniques, and develop your own skills in the kitchen. Then beyond Ruby, you can create your own recipes and dishes and have fun in the kitchen around plant-based or vegan foods. All right. Thank you. All right. Annette asks, what helps us become more comfortable in cutting? And, I have 3 answers, and they are practice, practice, and practice. That really is the path to better cooking and, in this case, knife skills development. Take it at your pace, and then slowly add speed while maintaining the safety, right, of cutting. And it takes time. Knife skills development is something that you're going to just touch upon during the duration of your course, regardless of the length of your course. Okay, your learning will continue for a lifetime, literally, but it's going to be a long time during which you will be developing your knife skills. Okay, and understand that what we present to you in our courses is really just the beginning. There's so much more when it comes to knife handling. All right, so be patient, and understand that every time you use your knife, you're getting a little bit better. All right, thank you. All right, next question. Is it okay to use non-stick pan for the no oil saute activity, or does it have to be a stainless steel pan? So let me answer this in a couple of different ways. Okay, when it comes to the no oil saute assignments that you will submit to us for critiquing, we ask that you use the technique that we introduce, okay, which is the water ball or the mercury ball test to start to gauge the hotness of the pan, okay? And please use a stainless steel pan. Okay, you're going to heat up that pan fairly hot, and I don't recommend doing that with non-stick pans. Okay, and the second part here is that outside of that assignment, when you do no oil cooking, feel free to use a non-stick pan if that's more convenient for you. Okay, but for the assignment, please use stainless steel and the technique that's being taught in the lesson. Thank you. All right, and then Glenda says, Umami by Laia Jufresa or Jufresa is a wonderful novel, okay, set in Mexico City. Okay, cool. So some fun reading. I'll take a look at that, and hopefully others will too. Thank you for sharing. And let's see, Maribeth says, how do you spell umami? So right above that, Maribeth, you'll see the spelling U-M-A-M-I, umami. Want to look it up? Yes, please do. I think you'll have a lot of good reading to do. All right, thank you very much. And that was our last question. Thank you so much for joining me today for my office hours and, for your live event here at Ruby. And I look forward to seeing you next time. In the meantime, develop those knife skills. Be patient, be safe, and happy cooking to you. Thank you. Bye-bye.